Bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Et bienvenue dans le VSS HOUR. Non, pas moi, c'est Vanessa Joseph.
Non, pas M. Shirley Plantin.
Non, pas M. Sandra Denis.
Et nous gagnons. Oh, OK, so go ahead.
I thought no, pas M. Katia Filippo.
Et je dis, nous là, nous brancher sur le VSS HOUR parce que nous avons amis nous et guest co-host nous avec nous qui c'est Katia Filippo. So bienvenue, Katia. We're so happy to have you here.
Yes, always a pleasure.
So, on rentre directement dans Haitian Excellence avec Sandra Denis.
Not by Haitian Excellence, I co-host nous Katia Filippo, qui était un événement hier. Pensez que dans la communauté par nous toujours entendons parler de monde qui fait sick, monde qui a tension, monde qui fait cancer, mais il y a un bagage qui est l'épilepsie, crise que monde fait que nous pas vraiment entendre en pile parole de lui, nous pas parler de lui, nous presque pas vraiment y a un pile information sur qui ça lié et ça qui j'en ça agit sur quoi nous et qui impact les capable gagner dans famille nous. So na félicité Katia dans tout ça la fait. And you want to tell us a little bit about événement yeah, and then how people can continue to support you.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies. Nous avons une organisation qui est le Robert Filippo Epilepsy Organization. C'est une organisation que nous avons formée après petit frère Robert Filippo, qui a épilepsie. Et ça nous avons fait, c'est nous avons collaboré avec Epilepsy Florida pour nous faire une présentation, c'est une petite conférence d'informations sur épilepsie avec seizure. So, deux compartiments que nous avons discuté, c'était When Epilepsy Seizure First Aid. Donc, nous parlons de épilepsie, qui ça épilepsie, qui différents cas épilepsie qui gagnent, et que ça pour faire les gens qui ont une crise. Et si vous avez participé, vous avez fait un petit quiz, et après ça, vous allez recevoir un email qui gagne certification that your seizure first aid. En l'autre partie, c'était health literacy, que nous avons parlé de l'importance de le docteur, de l'information, qui ça pour demander questions, qui question pour demander, et l'importance pour connaître information que le docteur ou bien mon médical a baou. Parce que parfois, vous juste prendre l'information, et puis voilà, ou pas comprendre ça, il y a un médicament que vous avez, et puis il a fait plus mal qu'on vend que le docteur. Donc, c'était deux parties que nous avons discuté hier. Si vous allez sur Facebook, nous, de Robert Filippo Epilepsy Organization, ou après présentation, parce que nous avons mis live sur Facebook pour nous continuer à aller pour joindre l'information ça. Et puis, nous avons l'autre information qui a venu, n'a pas parlé de mental health, living with epilepsy, n'a pas parlé de medical marijuana, because en pile, moun pas comprendre que medical marijuana et des gens qui ont épilepsie et cancer. So, il est important que nous, la communauté haïtienne, nous fassions discussion sérieuse, que nous parlions pour connaître exactement ce qui a passé avec l'épilepsie. So,
I love to see it. I love to see it. Yon bagay mte vle ajoute sou sa Katia di se ke m konen nou. On moun fè yon kriz, nou tout debake pou nou ede, e gen de fwa nou fèl pi mal. So nous avons une organisation tant que Robert Filippo Epilepsy Organization. I think I mixed that up a little bit. But qui est capable d'aider nous parce que nous connaissons nous remet courir pressé aller à aider, mettre alcool sous les mounio, you know, ba yo les bagay ça, mais gen des fois ça c'est pas aider à aider mounio. Il y a une façon pour capable aider moun qui gagne crise pour capable pas mettre yo dans plus mal condition que yo hier. So gain
Ou dit ça c'est important parce que une chose que j'ai expliqué c'est que dans mix c'est pour mettre un cuillère dans la bouche pendant mon a fait crise and you're not supposed to put anything in anyone's mouth when they're having a seizure. C'est sous côté ou mettez mon sous côté mais il y a des gens qui pas comprendre ça. So l'important que you connaissez exactement qui ça pour faire, qui ça pour pas faire. So nous avons tout ça dans la présentation et nous continuer par information ça.
Merci Ampel. Do you all have any questions?
Je voudrais ajouter que bien content que vous avez fait ça hier. Katia, je souhaité que vous continuez à faire et que tu as gagné une série de conversations comme ça parce que dans la communauté par nous, c'est c'est une affaire médicale, nous connaissons science nous-mêmes, mais il y a des gens qui vont dire que c'est diable qui a mangé mon nan, et que c'est prier pour mon nan, ou bien menel kay un docteur fait qui comme pas de problème avec ça, mais cependant faut que nous connaissons que le gain bagay médical qui passe dans corps mon nan, faut que nous prenions ça au sérieux. Nous sommes bien contents que nous avons fait l'éducation ça, parce que je pense que pour la communauté, nous, il est important que nous comprenions ça et qui ça que nous-mêmes nous avons fait pour aider les gens dans la communauté nous qui souffrir avec ça. So, merci un peu pour tout le travail ça que vous avez fait. Shirley?
Yeah. No, Wembley, well, Tatia Kone, I'm a huge fan. But m'taime dit parce que nous connaissons que nous avons pile l'autre organisation that, you know, that comes on Sundays and supports surtout Hannah. So, m'taime l'autre organisation parce que nous connaissons que l'organisation Katia is young et yon nan bagay qui aide l'organisation ça au produit et avancer. C'est là que you join collaboration, partnership, other people qui jump déjà. So hopefully we'll see stronger partnerships reach out to Katia and say, how can we support? Again, it's going back to that collective power in the community. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. She's doing amazing work. So I'm hoping to see additional partnerships with other organizations in the community that's in the health field that will hopefully give you some space and opportunities to continue this message. You know, you can count on us here. Whatever and whenever you need us.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you.
Awesome. Mais Shirley, on rentre dans actualité.
Bon, semaine ça. So, no, let me ask y'all. We're going to do a round. We're going to do a rapid. We're just going to go in a rapid circle. I'm going to start with Katia. One word that express how you feel about what happened this week. So, semaine ça, nous taking Derek Chauvin's verdict. Tout le monde t'a préparé for all types of craziness et puis nous réaliser que du moment ça a fini, nous t'ai 24 heures de temps, côté t'ai 6 other police involved shootings and like we're in a state of complete chaos for lack of better terms, right? I remember who I worked for. On my time, the Central always reminds us, je dis dimanche là, c'est sous ta pam que mieux. But I just want us to rapid round. What's your thoughts? What's your feeling? Because you're not by réaliser tout que pas grand consensus really of how a lot of people are feeling. En plus, monde pense, oh là nous fin joindre ça, nous joindre justice. Is it really justice? So I guess is my question.
One word to describe this week with everything that's happened is exhausted to me, because we waited so long to see what verdict that would have been delivered with the case. And although a lot of us were surprised that he actually got a conviction, but it should, after how many cases, after how many shootings did we actually get a conviction? And was it justice when especially less than 24 hours later, they're shooting another person in Chicago, another police involved shooting? Like it's just exhausting that even for us to even have to have waited for a verdict for another young Black man that died at the hands of police was just exhausting.
Andrew?
Yeah, pour moi, je pense que la police États-Unis presque sans contrôle. C'est un, PI sur monde noir. And when you're talking about killing folks, pour moi, je pense que ma temps sentence là, pile monde pas vraiment comprendre que yo journée guilty c'est une. Combien d'années la fait en prison? Est-ce qu'il a fait année en prison? Qui ça juge là dit c'est D, right? We need to understand that. So I'm very much in the middle. Je pense que pas ouais qui Jean jury a tapal dit community noir qui yo pas jointly guilty. There was so much happening around the same time. Like Minneapolis would have burnt down. They were clear. It would have been, there was so much happening, so much killing in between that there was no way the jury could have really not responded only to George Floyd's case, but everything that's been building around that. And we understand that the jury is not who is providing the sentence. And so the judge, to me, is real suspect. I got a side eye for him. And so, n'attends toujours pour nous capable, because I don't think it's over. And I definitely want to talk about the young lady, Makisha, when we get there.
Vin?
Yeah, pour moi, m'ta dit que m'ta utilisé même parole avec Katia qui c'est fatigant, right? Like c'est comme si on va pas attendre on va arriver et puis finalement arriver mais kounya l'autre a pensé ou bien l'autre a quoi que ça t'a satisfait demain le lendemain on va arriver encore et puis bagay a continuer arriver and l'on pose des questions si c'est justice. Justice, justice c'est que George Floyd tape là toujours, right? C'est ça que t'as les justice, que la vie là toujours. Ou pas qu'à dire que la vie on monde perdu et puis qu'on y a le fait que yon monde condamné pour ça, that is enough for justice, right? Because the person ou pas j'aime qu'à remplacer moun, right? Parce que maman moun na famille moun still pas gen moun ça qui tourne dans vie, right? Mais ça qui est plus fatigant pour moi, c'est que gon moun qui te vini dans travail moi et moun a dit que George Floyd pas un homme qui était parfait. Donc pour qui ça tout le monde comme si a fait comme si ça son big deal que yote ça son gros affaire que yote non seulement tiré li c'est pas que moun nan croit que yote supposé que moun supposé a tuer l'autre monde mais c'est comme si le monde a fait comme si que George Floyd était un bon monde and you know whatever et le fait que même après presque 1 an parce que songez dans l'époque ça nous a dit moun pas même oser dire nous ça George Floyd t'a fait, ça le pas fait, nous pas besoin connaître parce que la vie au monde que le fait ceci, que le fait cela, il pas obligé de mourir, right? Et le fait que après presque 1 an, moi peut-être moi cap expliquer madame ça même bagaille là toujours like that for me was exhausting. Ça te prend pile dans moi, right? Ça t'est énervé because le fait qu'on a dit que you know what's the comme si il pas dit what's the big deal non mais c'est comme si l'a dit que bon nèg pas il pas tout bon c'est pas au monde qui était bon à tel point que nous t'a supposé faire tout ça et pour job moun ça qui pral dans prison OK pour job moun ça qui pral dans prison ak la déjà fait so you know kounya 2 familles a perdu 2 moun so I was like really frustrated. So you want to go before I finish or
I just want to make sure the moderator saw my hand.
So après ça, je pense que vraie justice là ou bien, you know, true accountability or ça nous-mêmes nous vraiment besoin, c'est que yo réformer système judiciaire, le système ça ici aux États-Unis parce que nous connaissons que les papes travaillent pour nous vrai. Right? And I think that that's when we'll start to be able to say that we're seeing true accountability. We're starting to see true quote unquote justice, right? Et puis, au dernier bagage que j'ai ajouté avant quitter Sandra pour la parole, c'est que même si yon moun pas parfait, même si yon moun did whatever, ça pas bay yon lot moun autorité sous ville. C'est même nous-mêmes qui avons dit que c'est bon Dieu qui a dernier autorité, c'est bon Dieu qui a dernier parole là. Mais là, on va quand ça arrive, au lieu de nous dire que ce n'est pas juste, nous avons cherché toute excuse, toute raison pour justifier ça qui passe. Et je pense que ça, c'est le problème. C'est pour ça que nous-mêmes, c'est pour ça que nous avons manqué ciel là. Je sais qu'on a dit nous chaque dimanche. OK? Donc, il faut que nous fassions très attention avec ça. Et puis, you know, yon dernier bagay, I just senti que pendant que nous menons bataille ça, you know, nous t'ai pas allé moi-même pour la rue parce que nous te connais que HB1, we was ready to try that. We want to see how, you know, knock if you buck, right? Nous t'ai grandi notre génération knock if you buck, qui c'est, you know that. So, you know, so I'm not going to see if y'all saw that meme that said, Ooh, thank God I could let me change out of my looting clothes.
Yeah.
I could not stop laughing because, you know, for a lot of people, we had a change of clothes in the car. We knew we was leaving work. We didn't know where we was going first. So, Sandra, go ahead.
Maki said, Shirley, is your next point Makisha? Because it's gonna la rejoindre sa Vanessa so des
Go ahead. We went straight into the shootings, the increased shootings anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah, nous avons tendance haïtien pour nous penser que, you know, Centre c'est un bon monde, il a une maîtrise, là, l'école, il c'est directrice, ça c'est bon monde. Parce que me fait this, me fait that, mériter l'amour, mériter, you know, vivre toujours. Mais cousine moi ou bien cousin moi, cap, you know, qui pas fait maîtrise, qui fait high school diploma ou bien il pas dans, you know, dans travail bureau pour yo te mettre mourir, yo pas besoin l'amour. Et si nous honnête à tête nous, il y a un pile dans nous qui croit ça. Nous croit ça dans gens nous recevoir monde. Qui est-ce nous féliciter et pour m'arriver sur Makisha avec George Floyd, raison qui fait ça vraiment un problème dans la communauté pas nous, c'est parce que c'est nous-mêmes qui pensons que c'est là c'est pour nous. Pendant ce temps, Bible a dit nous avant nous te fin laver tête nous te ça nous penser avant nous te vin fidèle là, c'est là ça Jésus te mourir pour nous. So while we were yet sinners, right? And so to me, I think for me, even what was happening with Makisha, there was so many Black people, so many Asian folks, so many people. Oh, she this, she that, she this. Oh, she was fighting with the knives. Y'all know how many fights I saw with the knives in my schools growing up, and nobody.
No, but what about that boy who was walking around with a gun in the protest?
But my thing is, my quick point on this is, I had a best friend who used to work with children who were diagnosed with rage. And they were in a home. Y'all know which kind of kids get the benefit of being diagnosed with rage. Because us, we don't get that. Y'all gonna be locked up. Y'all gonna be in somebody's list, alternative school, all that stuff. And they would teach them. I mean, when these kids would be at their manic stage, TVs would break, furniture would break. They would be buying furniture and televisions. They would fight each other with. They had to pull all the stuff out the house. And he had to learn techniques on how to de-escalate these kids with rage. These are everyday social workers who are learning these skill sets every day. Don't tell me that Makisha, who looks like me, who looks like us, that she deserved to get 4 bullets in her. And we have to explain this to our own people. It's the same thing. George Floyd gave a fake $20 bill. Where did he get the fake $20 bill from? Because if I have a fake $20 bill, of course Publix or Target gave it to me. Because back when they got plenty of fake $20 bills.
Yeah.
And so I just think that we have to be better about recognizing the humanity in all of us. And at the end of the day, we don't have the right to take people's lives. Mass shooters, that's a whole nother story. I'm not there yet in my political education work. However, these cases that we're saying, people who are, to me, going through an issue and police are called, she called the police at that, and she ends up dead. Ain't no way y'all can make me explain. And it's your leaders. It's the Haitian community. It's the ones that are the loudest who got all this to say. And I'm like, y'all have to take a seat and stop it with this, because it's not helpful. It goes back again to some folks deserve love. Some folks deserve a second chance. Some folks deserve, to get stopped and go to McDonald's on their way to, after they shoot people in the church. They deserve consideration, while Black people never get that consideration. And all of us who display that in our community, that is a result of the white supremacy that lives in us. Just because you're Black doesn't mean you don't have white supremacy that lives inside of you. And every time that bubbles up, it tells me that we have so much work. Of course we can't love each other, because that white supremacy is in us. We don't believe we're humans enough to not die at the hands of the police for a regular school fight. How many fights have I seen in Miami-Dade County? Worse.
But white supremacy montre nous que seulement gen bon et puis gen mal. Pas gen rien dans mi-temps, pas gen circonstances qui ka affecté gens que moun réagit. They don't, yo pas gen ça. So
And when you look at her story, V, when you look at her story, when you find out she's in foster care system, she calls the police. These people at her house.
Yeah.
These people are at her house. The story starts to come together, and there's no way again for these people who are quick to rush to judgment. And because you know, as the facts start to unveil, it says a lot. But again, a girl died. 4 bullets in her. It's sad.
So I want us to, and I think this is just in line with what we're trying to get people to understand. First is, remember, we don't have all the facts. So when people are drawing their conclusions and she was this and she was that, she wasn't this, I think we always need to remember that we don't have all the facts. Number one. So before you judge a Black girl who got 4 bullets in her, we don't have all the facts. That's number one. Number two, we really need to talk about mutual accountability, because before that fight got to the point for a police officer to get there, there was adults who were a part of the fight. There were adults who stood there recording. So we need to have a totality of the conversation. I'm all with the police did wrong and we need to hold them accountable. But there is a point in time that comes where we have to say, all these people sat here and watched the fight happen. We couldn't all of them go through PAR training. All of them go through de-escalation training. All of them know how to subdue these young people in their household. It's part of the training that is given for every foster care group home or whatnot. So somewhere along the way, before that fight got out of hand, that led to somebody picking up a knife, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I hear Sandra and I share her sentiments as far as the school fight, but we also need to understand that there were adults that looked like us who said we can be responsible to keep these children safe. So there is a question of safety on both ends, both from Keisha as well as that other young lady that was going to be stabbed. So somewhere along the way, there's a conversation that needs to be held with the owners or the foster parent, whoever's in that household. As part of looking at that backstory, there's some conversation that needs to be had, because if my child or my loved one or my somebody ends up in a foster care or ends up in a group home, which happens every day, that a lot of people don't seem to realize happen to our Black and brown kids every day before they get transported, especially par haïtien qui dit, "On m'pa vin pran m'pa voyel, m'pa vin chercher la police." You know where they send your child? To a group home until they have to go to court. You know who's responsible for them? A program that says, I will take care of your child and keep them safe. So the totality of the conversation for me is, we need to have a conversation with all these people that stood around and watched and did nothing. As well as, while we hold this police accountable for putting 4 bullets into her, we need to understand what did not happen to mitigate this whole situation from escalating to where it went. So for me, I really want to look at the totality of the conversation. And as long as we continue to see what we're seeing with law enforcement, we need to then have a conversation with our own communities, which will lead me to the next one before I go to, because y'all done got me started. You got a 3-year-old that was shot last night at a birthday party.
Mais avant que nous arrivions là, Shirley, est-ce que je peux juste reprendre ça dit? Parce que je pense que ça dit est très important, right? So, le fait que, oui, nous avons fâché avec le fait que un policier tiré son petit monde, mais te gen l'autre grand monde là qui était supposé, nous supposé te contrôler ça t'a passé. Mais en fin de compte, you know, pendant que je suis d'accord, I also, gon parti dans moi qui senti que si un policier, je pense que tout job, un policier, bon, gros parti dans job là qui c'est communication.
I disagree at all, but point que moi me fait passer, pas tap gen on nécessité pour un policier venir, grand monde qui te dans kay la te résoudre ou bien te font atteinte pour contrôler la situation.
Yeah. Non, moi, je suis d'accord avec ça. Mais même pour policier, c'est comme si, like, et encore, comme si il y a l'autre bagage qui a venu, nous pas qu'à courir parler sans pas connaître, nous pas là. Mais là, ouais, première vidéo qui était sortie, elle était choquante parce que c'est comme s'il fait paraître et puis immédiatement, c'est balle, right? Et ça, c'est choquant parce que pour moi, et surtout que le policier que moi-même je connais et que, ou même vous connaissez tout chez ou connaissez moun qui pas arrivé à un niveau ça parce que, you know, police officers who really grew up in these communities, ça yo connaît que leur go bataille ou essayer de contrôler bataille là sans pas même utiliser, you know, you use your own self. How many times have you stopped a fight when you were in high school, middle school? M'pa connaît sou j'aime changer and you know, dans l'école jeune fille te kon kebe rasoir na busho, right? Like, I don't know if they still do that, but you used to put a blade up here in the roof of your mouth and then pull the blade out in a fight. I don't know how many times, like, I've stopped fights, like, when I was younger, because, you know, I don't know if maybe when you're younger, and surely you could tell us, like, you don't have that sense of fear. You're not, you know, your adrenaline is rushing differently. But I remember being able to stop fights. You see what I'm saying? So I just feel like even if the cop had gotten there, right? Anzi que c'est des adultes qui grand moun sa yo te entièrement irresponsable, yo pa ganyen, you know what I mean? Like, let's say all of that, right? Mais policier, like, he wasn't, this wasn't his thing, because you saw the black police officer was trying to get down. He was trying to stop it. You see what I'm saying? So there's also something I feel like folk nou di that nou too, that in other police departments, you know, sometimes those police officers don't come from those communities either. And but c'est que ça gon facteur pour jouer là-dedans tout, parce que yo pas comprendre qui gens que si moun qui saute dans environnement ça yo fonctionner and things like that. So I just wanted to add that. You know.
Just another thing too, before you move on to the next one, is this is one of the first times that I've actually seen conversation where people are really trying, not to say justifying the shoot, but also questioning what would you have done if you were the officer and you saw the girl holding the knife and was ready to charge. So lately all the conversations that I've encountered were about like, oh, the police officer shot and the police is in the wrong, but people have actually come out and said, well, why was she holding the knife? And then the officer, you know, what would you have done if you were the officer? And it's like, then that, again, the comparison comes to the other mass shooters, like the guy, like you mentioned earlier, Vanessa, the guy that had a gun walking in the protest. You know, they're compared it to other situations where they actually talk them down or allow them instead of just engaging with the shoot. But what is important, like you mentioned, Shirley, is accountability. If there were adults there that actually did what they should have done to de-escalate the situation, and police didn't have to show up, and then the officers didn't have to shoot. But at the end of the day, we also need, it also questions like community policing, like Vanessa mentioned, because you show up at a party or you show up at a house and you see this happening. My first instinct isn't to shoot. My first instinct is to figure out what's going on and try to de-escalate the situation. But I think that's really where a lot of the argument is, whether or not shooting, like how the person shot, or whether or not you try to de-escalate the situation. And if it was a different environment, like if it wasn't a black kid, wouldn't that what they would have done instead? So that's really a lot of conversation.
A black girl, because black girls seem to be so threatening.
Yeah.
And then people talked about her. They're like, she's a bigger girl. I want to say that I find it quite offensive when people are like, what would you do in this situation? I'm not a trained police officer.
Yeah.
They've talked to people, they've talked to the institutions of policing around getting longer training. They've been against that for decades, for years. I think that these case-by-case analysis, to me, removes us from the systemic issue around policing that we have in America.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it in terms of Makisha and what happened at that scene. We know what happened at the scene.
Right.
Even when you slow down the video, and I hear Shirley around making sure we have all the facts. Even when you slow down the video, what we see, and again, there might be additional facts, is he arrived to the scene with his hand on the gun the entire time. Right? What about the other girl people say? I don't know that knife would have killed her. I know those 4 bullets killed Makisha. That's the evidence that we have. And I'm not saying that. I know in every instance, you talk about what was going to cause the least harm to everyone in the situation. And right now, we know that the officer created the most harm, right? And someone ended up dead. And 4 bullets, 1 bullet, 1 tase, I don't know. I know that we have a situation in America where policing seems to be, and not seems to be, is out of control. And we're talking about, and we live, y'all live, I mean, Shirley and Vanessa live, because, you know, me and Katya, I mean, Broward has its issues too. But don't want to get too far into the weeds. We live in a county and work in a county where the government has had to investigate some of our local police departments for being abusive in their powers. Historically known for being abusive, right? And so I don't think we get away. I don't think we don't get to talk about the issue from a case by case. We have to continue to say something allows for people to continue to die at the hands of police. And to me, something is telling them it's okay when you kill people, that you have the right to do this. And they have to unlearn that, or a lot more people will continue to die.
Great conversation. So HB1.
Elections have consequences.
Now
going into session, I'm so chatty today. Elections have consequences. Et gen pil moun ki tap gade nou. Oh, Central, apo pa di anyen, you know, ou pa nan state law, ou pa blite. Let me tell y'all what Central's not gonna do. We had elections, gen pil nan nou. All of us who were on the phone were involved in some way, trying to make sure that we got our folks out to vote, that we made sure that people who have similar values, we don't have the numbers in state of Florida. There was no way that HB1 was not going to pass. So here we are with HB1. I heard there's going to be a suit. We'll see where it gets us. A lot of states have similar stuff. But moun ki vle reme al nan manifestation, I would be very careful. Speaking to Vanessa, a lot of the immigrant groups who like to do manifestation protests, we got to be very careful to not put people in jeopardizing positions right now specifically. You know, I've always said this in the movement space. Everybody got to know their role. There are people who are willing and diehard, ready to be arrested. If that's you, for the team, I got it, I get it. But a lot of folks can't afford that. Not necessarily monetarily, but their status situations, their jobs. We just need to be very careful with folks who are going to take the streets. A lot of people thought people was going to take the streets. The governor signed it, and it was like, oh, this is going into effect today. So the law is right now.
He rushed to have it signed. It was signed.
Li te konen de rezultat ap tombe. Li tap ton nou. Li tap ton ni tou. E sa se lop mwen pou di sou sa.
I'm done. I'm done, V. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tsukisa.
No, I'm done. We're done with Cardi Vet.
No, we're doing a U-turn show. So aujourd'hui, on a parlé de U-turn youth consulting with Mayo. Et, you know, bien content, bon, pas bien content parce que malheureusement, sujet est très triste. But, you know, ça nous a parlé aujourd'hui, on rentre directement dans le travail que Shirley a fait. Et Shirley, c'est guest aujourd'hui. Hein, et c'est pour ça qu'on a comme guest co-host avec nous. C'est pour nous parler de U-Turn Youth Consulting et qui ça exactement que Shirley fait avec l'équipe. Le U-Turn Youth, nous connaissons qu'on sommet qui a venu le 30 avril. 30 avril, et que a bien différentes perspectives au gros conversation dans St. Thomas University. So it's called the We the People Summit. So Shirley, je pense que nous avons commencé avec une présentation de qui ça, yon introduction de qui ça U-Turn Youth Consulting est, qui sort de travail que nous fait et pour qui ça ou te même décidé de rentrer dans le travail ça exactement.
Bon, at this point, many people know the work that I do. Travail que nous fait avec jeunes dans la communauté. For years, I've always worked with young people, and I find that our young people they don't only want to be heard, they don't only want to be seen, but they need someone to fight and advocate for them. En tant que member of the Florida Gang Investigative Association, I've been in the fights, breaking up the fights. I've had, my girls go missing 21 days and we find them in dumpsters. I've accompanied parents puis ont enterré petit yo et puis jour vendredi soir parents connaît que la pral gen veillé et puis funeral home nan dit bon faut me remettre au cadavre parce que l'autre gang nan dit que l'a tiré si nous fait veiller à là. And that's just some of the stories que nous fait. Et avec le temps nous venons réaliser que it's not just the young people, right? It's the people working with our young people. We don't always understand the backstories that our kids have. So U-Turn lui-même établi là que me vient réaliser, okay, well, when I had a personal hit put out on me, realize, wait a minute, I got a son now, I got to rethink things, right? I can't be in the street being a renegade pour tout le monde et puis I happen not to be there for my own child. So nous venons déterminer, how do I make the switch from providing direct services to young people and realizing that something else needs to happen. Jeune tête mon réunion sur réunion sur réunion puis tout le monde qui parle de jeunes nous yo have no clue what they're talking about. C'est moun qui chita la ville, c'est moun qui chita dans belle bureau yo et puis k'ap di moun k'ap servi jeunes yo exactly what you need to do without taking into consideration what they're really going through. So nous écrivons un livre qui relate the backstory of a new reality, jaw-dropping unmasking of urban youth violence. Et livre là c'est lui-même qui baille vie à Utah, because we really wanted to unmask tout ça que jeunes yo ap subi pour moun k'ap travay avec yo ka comprendre. Because m'te jwenn tête moi non say de réunion là que moi-même I'm trying to explain what our young people are going through. People that are working with who are supposed to be my colleagues are like, really? That's what's happening? I'm like, so what the hell are you doing? Who are you serving if we're not serving the same kids? If you're not seeing the same thing, something's wrong with me. And that really gave life to U-Turn. And what U-Turn really does, originally when we started U-Turn, was really just to unmask the backstories that lead to urban youth violence. As a result of everything we saw last year, we took some time to really look at what we're doing and how do we expound upon that, right? So what we do now, adding all of the different components, is we look at the intersectional ties between systems and how those injustices, disparities, inequities contribute to the backstories that our kids and our families live, right? And how that contributes to the school to prison pipeline and ultimately the gun violence in our community. Parce que même conversation que nous sommes fait là about the criminal justice system n'a pi gros que juste la police que nous ouais, right? Nous ouais police ça parce que c'est police là qui n'a la rien, but et avocat, the public health, the public defender and the state attorney, juge k'ap bay ti moun yo sentence yo, the corrections and what happens in the prison. Faut nous garder système nan non totalité. Et c'est même bagay là avec éducation, right? We see the immediate teacher, but we're not looking at the administrators. We're not looking at the school board. We're not looking at the people that are making decisions. So my job through U-Turn and our entire team is really to sit back and say, listen, we need to understand how your system is hurting or contributing to the backstories that our kids are dealing with. So our clientele includes both Miami-Dade County Public School, Broward County Public Schools. We train police departments. We have clients, all of the hospitals, Jackson Health, the children's hospitals, you name it, we do it. We train many of the funders as well, because Mission Pano, we want to get in contact with the people that are directly serving our kids and saying, there's got to be a better way. So these conversations that we're having right now with police, don't tell me we want implicit bias, because implicit bias training changes attitude. It doesn't change behavior. So tell me that you want to understand why this community is the way it is. You want to understand before you send your recruits out into Little Haiti, why Little Haiti is different from what you were teaching them 10 years ago. So it's really causing our people to look at it from a totality of circumstances. It's hard work, but it's rewarding work.
Ou mentionné, ou bay nou yon mot qui c'est backstories. Est-ce qu'on peut expliquer exactement ça que les backstories? Nous-mêmes, nous habitués avec terme nan, parce que ou tellement parlé nous de ça, but est-ce que pour moun qui pas habitué avec terme nan, est-ce qu'on peut expliquer pour yo ça que les backstories?
So backstories, li ka servi both in a positive and in a negative. We all have something qui contribue à who we become, right?
Mm-hmm.
Experience. In English, a lot of us are now utilizing the term lived experience. Your lived experience is your backstory, right? Where you grew up, your educational status, your financial status, your parental status, your geographic status. As we know, certain geographies get shot up more than others. Education, the way that we disperse dollars on our educational, our zip code, healthcare. So, tout bagay who makes you who you are, all the experiences you've lived in your life are part of your backstories. There are backstories that promote you and propel you forward. And then there are those same similar backstories that hinder you, right? And then we want to look at how those systems that we're talking about, when you take a 7-year-old and you're arresting them on a school ground, that's a backstory that kid is going to have to live with, because now you've just introduced that kid into the criminal justice system, right? So we need to understand mental health is a backstory, the way we deal with it. Your immigration status is a backstory. So tout ça qui est de être un monde is what we consider your backstory. And a lot of times we're just looking at the present. So we're looking at Sandra, who happens to be the ED. And I'm using Sandra because Sandra talks about her backstory so much, about coming from, her mom, and, how her mom didn't play that, and her 4 sisters, and those are backstories. That's what she's doing. She's giving us her backstory. So Sandra isn't just the ED of the Miami Workers Center. She became the ED of the Miami Workers Center based on everything that she's always told us. And I think if we really want to make impact and change in community, you can't negate where people started and how they got where they are, because that's how we solve the problem, right? And in short, when we talk about youth violence specifically, everybody's always trying to put a Band-Aid on. But everything else, from HIV, and Sandra does the public health, from HIV to every other public health crisis we've had. If we take COVID, the main thing that we always try to do is look at the epidemiology. Where did it begin? So why is it that when it comes to gun violence, when it comes to police-involved shootings, why are we just trying to put a Band-Aid on it? Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about how we got here, and let's talk about what contributed to us getting here before we can truly fix it.
I have a question. So I think it's amazing. I've always been a fan when it comes to your stories of these with the youth and the violence, especially, how you mentioned earlier you had a hit on you. I remember that story when I heard it for the first time. I was like, what? Shirley? I mean, I know we're doing the God's work, but we got to think about our life here. But I think it's really important that you turned youth consulting, because, like you said, understanding the backstories, understanding the upbringings, and that lead to what we have and experience today is very important. So I wanted to know what has been what basically working in our Haitian community. I'm sure it's been very challenging with these type of stories. So I want to know more about how that experience has been in our Haitian community and why it's important to have these certain conversations. Because our Haitian people, there are certain things they don't like to talk about. And I think these are one of the subjects that they don't like to talk about, but I think it's an important conversation.
I want to add to Katya's question so that Shirley can answer with an example. I remember Shirley and I went to a church and did a presentation together, and we were talking about how in the criminal justice system, for a while, they've been saying Haitian kids, Timon Haitien, are very violent. You'll see them, like they'll burn you. Like when they fight, they fight. Mm-hmm. And I remember I made a comment, and I want Shirley to expand on it, because I think it dawned on me in that second that, a lot of Haitian kids experience violence, that kind of violence, from the people who say they love them.
Yes.
Like, come on, Kalemo Timonu, what blesse yo little bat you, what, by your collar na figi yo. If they're learning, what do women, right? What about Leo Zami yo, ke yo reme tu, epi zempete? You think they're not going to tear them apart? And so, like that, in that second, even in the conversation that Shirley invited me to, it dawned on me, of course they would be violent. If we're honest, a lot of us grew up in environments and experience. I think we're learning and we're growing, and it wasn't all bad. I always want to say that about our Haitian folks. I learned a lot. I am who I am because of us. And, flat, branches on the tree, that's violent.
Yeah.
And so what do we expect from these kids when
that's what they
experience? But go ahead, Shirley.
I think that's a great point, Sandra, to add to Katya's question, and I'll answer it with a quick story. I got a call from a particular police department that asked me, there was a guy, he had just committed this crime, and they needed to be able to tell his parents that he was in a gang, right? So his crime was a homicide, naturally, with an AK-47. They shot up this house. And now they wanted to understand the concept. So I get called in and I had this conversation. I mean, real laid back, you just wouldn't give it to him. So I walked in on him, and the dreads seem to always not give that I'm Haitian. So I asked him, what's good? And he looks at me and he's like, you ain't, so I asked him, how are you? He says, I'm good. And I don't think he understood the totality of what he was getting ready to face, right? The system itself, you're talking about a homicide, and I asked him, I said, yo, why did you have to do it so cruel? And he said, yo, you ain't ever gonna understand because you ain't Haitian. And then I said, sak du sa. And he kind of froze, right? And he said, I said, yeah, Haitian. So why you say that? And he gave me a story that I'll never forget. When I acted up again, yo mette ma genou sur du riz. To help me get it together. When I didn't get it right, yo mette ma genou sur du riz na soleil. And when I still didn't get it right, yo mette ma genou sur du riz na soleil avec un bagay sous tête moi devant pour tout moun web. So I really want to understand, I really want to stress the point that Sandra's saying. And he ended the story by saying, that's who I am. That's all I know. I've been taught to be cruel. So you telling me I did something cruel? Because c'est mon samye, c'est kon sa me leve. And that whole backstory concept, it stuck with me since then, just didn't really know how to verbalize it. So to answer Kat's question, in the Haitian community, a lot of times we don't want to hear that, right? I don't know how many times I've gone and knocked on doors with police departments before I even started doing this version of my work to tell a parent, hey, anti nouvelle m'pote parce que l'école la vlo connaît que conseil d'activité petit on la donne, and the answer I would get, ti chérie, merci beaucoup, but s'il nan gang, c'est nous mettel nan gang na. How can I help you? Right? I've had cases where I've gone to a mother, and I'll never forget this. The mom said, we went 3 different times. And the mom said, m'bagen ti moun ki gen gang la kay mwen, c'est l'école la, c'est police la. Ti chérie, m'remon c'est vrai, but ou gen le nan gang na tout. And 48 hours later, this house was shot up with 172 bullets. A 3-year-old, shot in the house. They flipped the house over, and there's drugs and money everywhere under Dankai Timamia, na little Haiti. So our people oftentimes don't want to come to grip with the reality, right? Comment c'est sous l'église yo? I don't know how many times while l'église lan djou, pasteur a djou. Nou pa gen problème a parent, pa beze pa la parent, c'est ti moun yo délinquant. But children are a product of their environment. So if I'm not talking to the parent to help keep them safe, what are we doing? So again, and then I've had pastors say to me, on vle vin pala avec ti moun yo, vle vin pala parent, yo konbe kob wap paye? Parce que pou faire son kob ya ba ou. So yes, it is a constant conversation. Our community says yes to everything when it comes to systems. The police knock on the door and they say, can I search your house? They don't know no better. They don't ask for no warrant. You're denying for them. And then now you wondering why your kid walking out because you just gave him the house. Yes, Mr. Principal, no problem. So our community needs advocates. Our communities need advocates that are going to tell them the truth, that are not going to butter it up, because clearly buttering it up has not stopped us from being more than 51% of the population in the juvenile detention center. Clearly, buttering up our community has not stopped on a Monday morning when you get to the children's courthouse. Son bon petit mami qui campe devant juge that have no clue what's about to happen to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shirley. You were a fantastic guest. Et merci a pile à Katia Filippo, our amazing co-host, our favorite co-host ever. Encore une fois, nous sommes branchés sur le VSS HOUR. Non pas moi, c'est Vanessa Joseph.
Non pas c'est Shirley Plantin.
Et non pas c'est Sandra Denis.
Et non pas c'est Katia Filippo.
Et nous souhaitons voir nous encore dimanche prochain. Bye.
Bye. Hi, Bobby.